Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to part 2 of this mini-series on taking guitar exercises and turning them into musical tools or ideas that you can actually use. Today's exercise is one of my favorites, and it's very good for switching chords, so a lot of the ideas that we'll come up with are going to be more chord-oriented. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link in the description. And now, let's get on to part 2. The exercise is basically holding your fingers down in a particular shape. Usually a lot of people play this like a little staircase shape, which actually is a 1, 3, 5, 7 major 7 chord. So this is actually a usable figure. But what you will do is basically, there's a lot of different approaches to this, but one of the common ones is to hold certain fingers down. So I'm going to hold down my pinky and ring finger, and you flip the other two fingers. So right now my middle is on the B string, pointer's on the high E string, and I'm going to flip their strings. So the middle finger moves to the high E string, pointer finger moves to the B string. And you basically just do this. So you hold these two down and flip these fingers like this. You kind of don't really even have to play, although you should, to make sure, none of the notes are dead or you're not getting any buzz notes. Whoops, let me turn on my guitar. That's the idea. And then, of course, you try different combinations of fingers. So I just held down pinky and ring, moved these two. So now I'll hold down pointer and pinky and move the middle two like that. Same idea, just kind of flip-flopping to their respective strings. Get some pretty wild sounding chords. And then, of course, you can understand what the next one will be. Keep these two held down, move these two, ring and pinky. This one is probably the most difficult for people. And this is also actually kind of a chord progression. This is B flat, major 7, and this is sort of F dominant right here. So, yeah. And then you could do different things. So far in that situation, I was always flipping fingers that were next to each other. So what you can then do is flip fingers that are not right next to each other, kind of skipping every other. This tends to be difficult, at least this is difficult for me, or has historically been difficult for me. So that would look like this. Keep ring and pinky, for example, but flip pointer and ring. So keep middle pinky, flip pointer and ring. So that looks like this, right? So pointer finger moves up to the G string, ring finger moves down to the high string, and it sounds like this. Very exciting. And then you can understand what we'll also do. Hold the pointer and ring, flip middle and pinky, looks like this. This one is also pretty difficult, right? And then you can do any combinations you want. I haven't done the outer fingers. I can, of course, do that, right? Pointer and pinky. And then you can do combinations. Flip one set, then flip the other set, then flip back and flip back. So that looks like this, right? Fun stuff. You can also do different combinations. I'll flip pointer and ring like this, then flip middle and pinky, and then back like this, right? Very tricky to do. I honestly can't remember where I learned this. I feel like I want to say this is in the John Petrucci Rock Discipline DVD, but I can't remember if maybe portions of this exercise is in that DVD. I can't remember exactly where I learned it, but I did it a lot in my classical guitar playing days because it is very effective for switching chords primarily, because the main thing that's happening, like I mentioned earlier, you are holding fingers down while, and this is the most important part, moving the other fingers simultaneously, right? Notice every time what I'm doing here is I'm lifting fingers and moving them at the same time like this. Now, you don't necessarily have to hold the other two fingers down. Even just having a chord like this and just flipping all of them, kind of doing this like staircase like this, staircase like that, that's valuable as well. But the holding of the fingers down, that sort of thing really forces your other fingers to move independently because these other fingers are busy, right? The fingers that are moving have to sort of have a mind of their own to be able to move, and you have to make sure the other fingers do not release pressure. So that's kind of the tricky part of this exercise. Great exercise, no doubt. And again, it emulates what you should be doing when you're switching chords. So if I, for example, play a C chord to a D chord, in order to do that effectively, I really have to move all my fingers at once to make sure I'm getting there on time, to make sure everything is clean. One of the biggest issues in the early stages of people learning how to switch switch chords is they do this kind of one finger at a time motion where they'll play a C chord and then they'll move to a D chord like bum, 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 one finger at a time. That's not necessarily always a bad thing. Sometimes with certain finger style tunes, that's actually something you want to do for a variety of reasons. But when you're just switching chords like this, you really want to get into the habit of course, having one chord. And then as you move to the next, you're forming the chord in the air and then you place everything down, right? To make sure everything is clean, make sure your positioning is good, all that stuff. That's really what you're doing in this exercise, right? You're lifting your fingers, reforming the shape in the air, putting them down at the same time, right? Lifting your fingers, reforming the shape in the air, putting them down at the same time. That's what this is really practicing. So because of that, what we can actually do to kind of turn this into a more musical set of shapes and sounds, although, I mean, some of these are definitely chord shapes, but personally, I don't know how often I'm going to be doing this or this, right? It might be kind of fun in certain moments, but in most musical scenarios, these are going to be maybe a little bit too dissonant. Not saying you can't do it, of course. There's definitely ways to use all of these sounds, but I want to reorganize this exercise in a way that I can definitely use it in a variety of situations. And the best thing for us to do is simply look at chord shapes that we are already playing. So the main thing to remember as we are turning these exercises into musical things that we can use, I'm going to approach it with shapes that I personally enjoy, shapes that I use, shapes that I find to be very common, but that doesn't mean you have to do exactly what I'm doing. The best thing that you can do is take the approach that I am using and apply it to the things that you're already playing so you can immediately turn that stuff around and have things to do to enhance your own play style. Obviously, you can just copy what I'm doing and see if you find some stuff that you like, but make sure you're not only just trying to learn what I'm showing you in this video, make sure you're taking the general approach and doing your own thing with it. So with that in mind, what we're really going to be focusing on for this video is applying this technique to chord shapes, because this technical exercise is really geared towards switching chords, because that's basically what we're doing, like we just talked about. You're holding fingers down, moving other fingers simultaneously, all that good stuff, which is essentially what you would be doing when you're switching chords. So let's see how we can apply this exercise to some chord shapes. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the chord I'm playing or the chords that I'm playing are going to be in a key. You don't have to do that, but the reason why I like to do it is because it gives me a bunch of different sounds that I know are going to be used in music, right? If I'm playing in a key, I'm going to be playing these exercises on a 1 chord, on a 2 chord, a 3 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, and those chords are going to be very common throughout the spectrum of music. So if I can create some exercises on top of these chords, there's a good chance that I can use what I come up with in an actual playing setting. So that's one thing you'll always kind of see me do, is run everything that I'm doing on every chord in a key. So I would do that with whatever shapes you come up with. I would do the same thing. So let's just get started. How about we'll do this simply in the key of C to keep it really simple. And let's start with this basic little chord shape right here. This is just 1, 5, and 3 of C major. I'm only playing the A string, D string, and B string right here. Pointer, ring, pinky. So this is actually a super common move, but it also gives us an opportunity to do this exercise. So watch what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm going to change my fingering. So instead of pointer, ring, pinky, I'm going to play pointer, middle, ring. Now you'll see why in a second. It's a little bit different. You might have to kind of twist your wrists in a little way to make this comfortable. But what I'm going to be doing is playing every chord in the key. So 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, so on and so forth. And I'm going to switch back and forth between the chord's third and its respective fourth. So notice the movement that you get. If I just play the chord 1, 5, 3, and then 1, 5, 4. So you see what's happening? I'm holding these 2 fingers down while flipping my ring and pinky. And notice what happens. My ring is being played, and then when I go for the pinky, they both move at the same time. Ring lifts, pinky goes down, and then back. Right? Now, the goal when you're doing this, of course, is to make sure that you're still hearing these notes. Like, if it starts to become a dead note or something, that means you're accidentally releasing pressure on the power chord section of the chord. So make sure that's not happening as you're going through this. Also, side note, this stuff playing fast doesn't really matter. I mean, it's good to push the tempo, make sure you're comfortable at a variety of different speeds, but really it's more about cleanliness and being accurate and making sure that your fingers are moving simultaneously. That's the most important thing. So don't feel like, just because you can play it faster, that means you're now better. Not necessarily. Really, sometimes the hard stuff is doing it super slow and making sure that you're maintaining pressure on the strings all the time. Sometimes that's even harder than doing it fast like that. That can be physically more challenging because you're moving your fingers a lot. But as far as keeping it clean, sometimes holding the chord down and playing it slow is a little harder, at least in my experience. So that's the 1 chord. Then I'm going to move up to the 2 chord and do the same exact thing. But what is the 2 chord? It is minor, 1, 5, flat 3. So this is kind of a more normal chord shape. Pointer, ring, middle. And then what am I going to do? Add its 4 to the mix as well. So that 4 is still right here, just like it was here. See where the 4 is in relation to the 1 and the 5? It's kind of like up a fret on the B string. For the minor chord, it's also up a fret on the B string because it has a normal 4. In this situation, 1, 5, play my 3rd up top. By the way, I'm also picking everything pick, middle, ring. You can strum these, totally cool if you want to. Just make sure you're muting strings that you don't want. Or you could just play it with open strings, kind of nice if you're going for that color. Certain keys are not going to work with that, but you can experiment with that. Or you can do straight finger style, so thumb, pointer, ring, or whatever you want. Regardless, take a look at what I'm doing. Holding these 2 down, middle finger, and then popping my pinky down, simultaneously lifting my middle finger back and forth, just like this. Right? Again, hold the chord down, make sure it's clean. This one's probably going to be easier because the chord shape, we're using a more typical fingering, right? Go to the 3 chord, it's exactly the same thing, right? Now, the 4 chord is slightly different because we do not have a 4. 4s do not have a normal 4th. They have a sharp 4, so that note is actually up here. So this makes even more sense to play it with pointer, middle, ring, like this. So we can play this, grab that sharp 4, right? Really trying to lift the fingers, move them at the same time. 5 chord just looks basically like the 1 chord major with a 4, right? 6 chord looks like all the other minors. All the minor chords have normal 4s, by the way. 7 chord is diminished. 1, flat 5, flat 3 has a normal 4, so it's up here. Doesn't look like it's normal, but it actually is in relation to the root, right? If that's 1, normal 4 is always down 3 strings, up 3 frets, just like that. So we do this. Again, trying to lift that ring, pop the pinky down at the same time. And you move through all the keys. We might as well play 1 up here. Or excuse me, you move through all the chords. Notice everything I was doing right there was only on the A string. So my root was always on the A string. At any moment, you can move to different strings, of course. So for example, if I want to play my 1 chord right here, 2 chord, 3 chord. If I want to go to the 4 chord here, of course I could do that, but I could also go here. It's the same exact chord. The fingering is also identical too. So 5 chord, 6 chord. Yeah, this one is tricky. I can even feel it. Sometimes my ring does not want to move at the same time. What might happen, you might do this. Let's say I'm playing this 5 chord right here. Root, 5th, 3rd. You might just want to hold all of these down and put the pinky down like this. Not necessarily a bad idea, right? But what's trickier and what hones in on what the exercise was doing originally is really lifting the ring and then pinky. This is that kind of like flip back and forth sort of thing that you're doing. So again, you can use these exercises to whatever extent makes sense to you. So that makes perfect sense. Very simple move. We're practicing bits of that exercise, kind of building our dexterity with ring and pinky, by the way. Most of the time, this is ring and pinky or middle pinky. So this is a nice way to kind of strengthen that pinky, which some people have a problem with. We're, of course, holding all the fingers down, doing all that good stuff. But what are we also doing? We're moving through the key, practicing our chords in the key, absolutely fundamental thing every single player must know. And we're also practicing this additional color that we're adding to every chord. Every chord, we are adding its respective 4th, right? That little top melody is always the chord's 3rd, 4th, 3rd, 4th. Sometimes the chords have flat 3 if they're minor. Sometimes the chord will have a sharp 4 if it's a 4 chord, excuse me, it's the only chord with a sharp 4. But you'll learn that stuff, right? And here's the other thing. What I'm saying, if you're not familiar with it, to be honest, let your ear guide you as you're going through this. Your ear will tell you what the correct type of 4 is or what the correct type of 3 is, as long as your ear is tuned to the key that you're in. It will be easier than you think, especially if you're going through this sort of thing, right? 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord. When you get to the 4 chord and you do this, your ear is going to be like, is that correct? Like, there's something about this note that's probably going to perk your ear and say, this sounds cool. Like, it's not like I can't do it at all, but this note doesn't sound like it fits in the same pool as the rest of the notes that I just played. And your ear might say, hey, maybe that note is up a fret. And you'll play that and say, oh, it actually is. And then you play it in sequence, right? Tricky. And you'll say, oh, that actually is correct. That little variation is the correct sound for this chord. It sounds like it lives inside of this key. And then you can look and say, well, what the heck am I doing? This whole time I thought I was playing 4 right here. And I am playing 4, but up here it's not 4. 4 would be there. I'm playing sharp 4. Oh, that's because 4 chords have sharp 4s, right? Let your ear kind of confirm the knowledge that is in your brain. That's often the best way to learn any music system stuff, music theory, if that's what you want to call it. Having your ear confirm these sounds, you look at the fretboard and say, oh, that's why this sounds correct, or that's why this sounds the way it does, because it is XYZ. That's always what you want to do. The best way to confirm this theory stuff is to hear it. Let your ear guide you, and your brain confirms what your ears are hearing. So, of course, you could do this exact sort of thing on other strings. Like if I wanted to play, instead of playing 1 right here, climbing all the way up to 4, like I just did, I could play 4 right here, like I mentioned, on the D string. Shapes look exactly the same. Or I could go down to the E string right here. Right? Looks different because of the tuning of the guitar, but this is still 1, 5, 3 to sharp 4. Right? I could play this. That's the 5 chord, 1, 5, 3. 1, 5, 4, right? This is verbatim the same thing as this, just looks different because of the tuning of the guitar, and it's down an octave. Right? 6 chord would be barring, but you could even do something silly like this, like, right? This is probably not the most feasible way to play the chord, but what's the point? The point is to try to repurpose this exercise. And notice what I'm doing, holding middle and ring down. God, my hand looks ridiculous. And I'm flip-flopping pointer and pinky. This is 1, 5, flat 3, and flip-flopping pointer and pinky. Whoops. This is tricky, actually. Yeah. I don't dislike this. I probably would never play this in my actual playing life. Sometimes I would, though, if I want to go like little move like that, I can easily grab it too. So even though it looks really stupid, there's actually some musical viability to this fingering. But again, looking for opportunities to use some of these exercises with chord shapes that I'm already playing. One more kind of fun thing you can do with these little 1, 5, 3 chord shapes moving through the different chords in the key, it's maybe a little bit unnecessary, but I kind of like it because you do get some interesting musical opportunities. And that's basically this. If I play that first chord, just normal 1, 5, 3, C major, and if I move to the 2 chord, which would be D minor right here, 1, 5, 3, but flat 3, instead of just moving my fingers up, keeping pointer ring on the power chord with the 3rd on top of the pinky, and then just moving the shape up and playing the minor version, you can try this. It might look kind of silly, but again, there are some musical reasons why it could be pretty cool. You play this fingering for this, and then for that minor chord, instead of doing this fingering, you use this fingering. So we're going from pointer, ring, pinky to middle, pinky, ring, like that. So watch this. Right? Again, you might say, why on earth would I do that when I could just go like this? And again, we're trying to look for ways that we can sort of use the general idea of that exercise, which was what? Moving all your fingers at once in some sort of musical context. And this is a musical context that we can do it in. Now, you might say, this is stupid. Why would I ever do this? Right? Like, I understand we're working on the exercise, but this is just pointless. It's not really, because you do have some interesting opportunities. For example, when I play this chord, and I move to this D minor, instead of playing it like this, I play it like this. What do I now have? I have a free pointer finger to do whatever I want with, right? Well, the pointer finger gives us all of these notes back here that I can experiment with. So for example, I'm playing this chord. Remember earlier we were adding in the 4, which was this note right there. So if this is your root, that's your 4. But you know what else is a 4? Root 4, right? That's a G right here. So is this. So with my pointer finger now free, I can actually grab this 4 right there. Maybe throw in the open G string. It's a really nice chord, right? And that was made possible because of this kind of stupid fingering that I decided to do to force myself to practice and exercise. This is one of the best things where you start with the idea in mind of I'm going to practice, I'm going to do an exercise, and all of a sudden you get like a cool musical result out of the exercise as long as you keep your mind open for little creative movements that you can capture. And that happened right here. Oh, look at this. I'm playing the chord in kind of a stupid way, but my pointer finger's free. Oh, look at that. I can grab this note. Oh, that's nice. Sounds cool. Maybe I could do like a little slide into the 5. I like that sound. And this is also giving me the same sound that I was doing earlier with the hammer onto the 4, except now with this new fingering, I can play the flat 3 and the 4 at the same time. Whereas earlier I had to get rid of the flat 3 and play the 4. Now I can play them at the same time because of this mildly stupid fingering, right? So 1 chord, 2 chord. I can't even, this could be like a riff or something. Boom, boom. Already kind of like it. And all of that came from me just forcing myself to do something that might seem kind of stupid. All of a sudden I get some different opportunities. And then of course I can pop my pointer finger down to some other notes, something that we'll talk about here in a second. We're going to use this shape in the next part of the video. But again, use this kind of silly fingering instead of doing the normal way, doing it like this. But that opens up the pointer finger again to play some other notes. What string am I not playing? I'm not playing the G string. So what can I play on the G string? I can play this note, right? Open high E string for some extra fanciness. What is this chord? Why would I choose this note right there? Well, this chord is D minor, 2 chord in the key of C, right? What note would this be? If this is my root for this chord, D, this note would be its 6th, right? That's D, the root, go back 3 frets, that's always 6. Or this distance from the A string to the G string, that is 1 to 6. What is the sound of the 2 chord? Talked about it in part 1, minor, which we're playing, with a 6. So with this somewhat silly fingering, I now have a really nice way to play the sound of the 2 chord, minor with a 6 right there. Nice. And again, that came from me using this moderately silly fingering. You could do a bunch of stuff. You can play, how about instead of going C, D minor, like this, I can go D minor, E minor, right? This one is even stupider because I should just go D minor, E minor and not move anything. But again, I'm forcing myself to practice the general idea of that exercise, right? Moving my fingers all at once. So I'm playing D minor to E minor. And again, look, I have the opportunity to grab its 4 on top. Notice the distance is the exact same as this root to its 4, this root to its 4, right? I learned this chord shape from the previous spot. So I can go, already sounds kind of cool. And this comes from me just looking for opportunities to practice this basic idea, which is moving all your fingers at once. Now, this one is not necessarily holding fingers down like the exercise was doing, but I still think it serves a very similar purpose and is super valuable. And again, I'm getting some pretty cool sounds out of the process. So now let's move on to some other types of chords that will be a little bit thicker in their sound, and these are also very common. We will play the 7th chord versions of every chord in the key. We'll continue in the key of C to keep it consistent. So the one thing I want to do is look for an opportunity to practice the sort of finger flip exercise that we are going over, but within the chord shapes that I already know. So let's get started. C major, we are playing, of course, 1, 5, 3. That's what we played before, but I can easily just pop my middle finger down on the G string, and now I have the 7th chord version, major 7. 1, 5, 7, and then 3, right? Turns it into this chord. Now, there's another note that I personally really like to play with this chord, and that is this chord's 6th, which we've already talked about many ways to find it, but the easiest way to find 6 from this chord is look at your 7, which is right there, and go back 2 frets. That chord sounds like this. Really nice, one of my favorites. So what happens if I want to switch back and forth from the major 7 chord to that 6 chord, major 6, or just C6? Look at what is built into that move. Here's the major 7 chord. Now, in order for me to play that 6 back here, I need to move my pointer finger off of the root, play the 6, and then my middle finger will replace my pointer finger on the root. So this chord shape, 1, 5, 7, 3. This chord shape, 1, 5, 6, 3. But I had to flip these fingers to do that. Well, hey, that's exactly what we're trying to practice. Holding these 2 fingers down, flopping these 2 fingers, right? So if I play that. Maybe I can move it around. Play something that's not so syncopated. I'm literally just moving the chord to random spots, trying to get some sounds in my head. Everything I'm already doing sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll try with a vocal melody or something like that, right? You see the process. I discovered something that I found to be technically viable as an exercise, also sounds cool. I'm just messing around looking for opportunities, right? And this is giving me that hold the fingers down, flip the other fingers around sort of motion. So now I've got it on the 1 chord. You know what I'm going to do? This exact structure of an idea, which is what? The 7th chord, and replacing the 7 with this chord's 6th. So I'm going to go through every chord in the key and do that. Again, this will teach you what each chord's 6th is. And if you don't know, all you need to do is use your ear. Let your ear guide you. And when you find the correct choice that sounds correct to you, back it up with the actual knowledge of what you're doing. So if I play that with the 1 chord, right? By the way, I'm doing this with pick and fingers. You can obviously strum this. I'll mess around with some different ways to do that here in a second. Let's go to the 2 chord. So the 2 chord is here. Notice it's what? 1, 5, flat 7, flat 3. All minor chords in a standard major key have flat 7s. So notice the major 7 was where? 1, here's an octave, 7. But the minor chords have a flat 7, 1, octave, 7, flat 7 on the same fret. That's why you bar this. 1, 5, underneath the bar on the G string, flat 7, and then flat 3. So this is a 2 chord. I already know what kind of 6 the 2 chord has. We've been talking about it quite a bit. It's a normal natural 6. Same distance as the 1 chord and its 6. So how would I make this switch? Like that, using our silly fingering. In reality, though, this is a good thing to practice, but what are we really trying to do, though, with this exercise? Remember, we're trying to hold fingers down while we flip-flop the others. So I'm going to reconfigure the fingering to look like this. 1, 5, flat 7, flat 3, pointer, pinky, middle, ring. Again, might seem silly, but we're doing this for a purpose, so we can practice this sound, practice this move, I should say, and get this cool sound. Look at what we have now. These 2 fingers, pinky and ring, and while those are being held down, pointer and middle flip-flop. We go from pointer playing root, middle on flat 7, to middle on root, pointer on 6, just like this. Back to the 1 chord, right? Definitely tricky. I mean, I like the sounds, but yeah, this is a tricky move for sure. If I keep going to the 3 chord, okay, this is 2. 3 is right here. Notice what happens. While that is a cool sound, your ear probably says, that 6 right there doesn't seem 100% in the same pool as the rest of the notes. Your ear might say, I think this is not a 6, it's actually back here. So, and that would be correct because 3 chords, which is what I'm playing right now, have a flat 6. That was normal 6, 1 and 6, flat 6, 1 and flat 6, right there. This is also a totally different chord at this point. This is a C major 7, one chord with 3 in the bass, which we'll talk about, but that's for later on in the video. So far, a 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord. Again, flip-flopping these 2 fingers, different shape too, providing an extra little challenge, more of a stretch between the pointer and middle, while keeping the pinky and ring held down, right? Then 4 chords going to feel exactly like the 1 chord, right? Dominant, this chord, our normal dominant 7, 1, 5, flat 7, normal 3. There's our 7, move it back a fret to 6. Now you can do that, go from the bar and then middle on the root, pointer on the 6. To retain the point of the exercise, I'm going to keep these 2 fingers down and I'm going to flip-flop these 2. Pointer on the root, middle finger on the flat 7. Kind of tricky, but again, to retain the point of the exercise, I'll do it like this. I also want to do this too, which is, there's some value there, but I'll keep the flip-flop going. Definitely tricky. 4 chord, 5 chord. 6 chord is going to feel just like the 3 chord because it has a flat 6 also. There's also an F major 7, 3 in the bass. I'll talk about that in a second. 7 chord, right? There's our little shape. 1, flat 5, flat 7, flat 3, like this. We flip-flop pointer finger to its flat 6, which it has, middle finger on the root, just like that, while holding these 2 down, right? And then we're back to the beginning. So I like that one a lot because the sounds are cool and we're getting that exact movement that we're trying to practice, holding 2 fingers down, moving the other 2 fingers around like that. So that one is practicing what? Holding these 2 fingers while we move these 2. Is there something that I can do to kind of flip that, where I'm holding these 2 down, but moving these 2? So let's experiment. Here's my 1 chord, C major. Is there something I can do to kind of flip these fingers around, right? We were kind of adding that little 4 on top from earlier. Maybe we can do something with that. So one shape that I'm doing, this is a very difficult one for sure. Not terribly feasible, but still good to practice. And there are some workarounds that we can make as we do this. So check out what I was doing here. So I was actually starting with 1, 5, 7, 4 of each respective chord. So this, kind of an interesting sound. 1, 5, 7, 4 of C, like a suspension. And then what I'm doing is I'm moving my pinky to this 6 on the D string, ring finger down to the 3, turns it into this. A lot of different ways to look at this chord. I kind of, to keep it simple, I'll look at it as C, 1, 6, 7, and then 3. Also kind of look at this as an A minor chord, but that's for a separate topic. So back and forth, right? Very tricky, but this is effectively doing what we're trying to practice, right? Holding these 2 down while we move these 2, right? Definitely tricky. I'll be honest, super cool sounding though, right? Even though it's tricky, it's giving me some really cool sounds that I enjoy. All right, let's continue to the next one. What's the next one? The 2 chord. Remember the criteria. We're starting with each chords 1, 5, 7, and 4, just to give us some variation, and we're doing this little flop like that. We flop to the ring finger on the 3rd of the chord, pinky up to the 6th of the respective chord. What would that look like for the 2 chord? We're starting with 1, 5, 7, and then it's 4, which is a very normal chord. Suspended 7 chord, suspended 4 if you want to call it that. Middle finger in this case goes to the flat 3, and my pinky goes up to the 6, right? It's a little bit different because we're moving different sets of fingers. We're now moving the middle finger right here, right? Very tricky. Really cool sounding though. Really getting that pinky up there is a pain in the ass, but very cool sounding, right? And my ring finger is actually not doing anything for that one right there. So we move up to the 3 chord, do the same thing. This one's actually gonna be pretty easy. From here to there, right? So we're going from E minor, 1, 5, flat 7, 4 of E minor, to 1, flat 6, flat 7, flat 3 of E minor. But now this one is really important because I find this one to be, first of all, physically the easiest, and it sounds really nice. This chord is definitely something else. This is now basically, at least how I would look at it, a C major chord. C major with 3 in the bass. 3, 1, 2 under the G string, or under the bar on the G string, 5 on the middle finger. This is a very common shape, use it all the time, right? So you can kind of use it in that situation. For example, if the chord behind you is C, you can go here and play this instead. If I sing C as the root, bum, I'll hold that over this move, bum. Sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to remember that one because it's been, frankly, the easiest one so far, and it sounds really nice. And I'll think about different opportunities that I can use this with. I can also, a little side note, I can also, instead of playing this thinking C as my root, I can play this thinking A minor as my root. Because C major, A minor, relative major, and minor, anything you do over a C chord, you can also basically do over an A minor. I'll sing A, see what that sounds like. Bum, bum. A little low for me, but very cool sounding. And then you continue through the rest of the chords. Let's try it with the 4 chord. 4 chord's probably going to be pretty difficult because we're going 1, 5, 7, and then it's 4, which is way up here. Cool sound though. And then I'll flip to this, right? This is really nailing that finger flop that we're trying to do. Holding pointer and middle, flipping ring and pinky. They're not changing frets. They are changing strings. This is very difficult for sure. Yep, very difficult. I don't know how often I could use this one, but very nice, getting a really cool sound. And then we do the same thing with the 5 chord, which looks like this. Again, 1, 5, flat 7, its respective 4, which is a normal 4. And then we are playing the 3rd of the chord on top, and we are playing its respective 6, which is a normal 6. Like that. Kind of cool. Big, dense, dominant chord, right? Do the same thing on the 6 chord. It's going to feel just like it did on the 3 chord. Another really nice, easy, colorful one. So I would say that's the one to memorize because it's just very easy to play. Let's try the 7 chord. So the 7 chord, 1, flat 5. We have flat 7, and then its respective 4 is here. Right, just moving through all the chords in the key, keeping the same exact pattern. And then flipping, playing the flat 3 on top, and then its respective flat 6, which is, or its respective 6, which is flat in this case. That one's really nice. Another very easy finger flop. Let me move it down here just so you can see the finger a little bit better, right? Here's our chord, 1, flat 5, flat 7, it's 4. I love this sound. And then you flip them, just like that. That one's also really valuable, for sure. This one also has a lot of double usage. For example, this is, like I mentioned earlier, whenever you play this chord sound, you're technically playing 3, 1, 2, 5 of whatever this note is. That's a G. So when you go to G's 3rd, B, and you play this, you're really playing like a G add 9 chord. Just like down here, we were playing a C add 9 chord, right? That's really the root. And we start this chord on E. You can play this. That's really an F add 9. That's the root, but you start on its 3rd, A in this case. That's what you can do here. So this is a nice sound you can use over like a G7 chord, right? Very nice. And we're really nailing that exercise. I probably wouldn't do this with the ring finger down there. I'm just trying to make it clear so you can see what I'm doing. But I like that one a lot. It's a lot of them are very awkward to play, but they sound really cool. So here's one other little cool option that you can do with this. If you like these sounds, but they're a pain in the ass to play, which they mostly are, although that's good because the whole point is to practice this as an exercise. If you like this exercise sound and you like the movements, just do the same thing, but no root, right? You can almost use these shapes on top of a band who's already playing the root, and you still sort of get the exercise element out of it. So if I play this, right, thinking C in the bass, play it correctly. So that's 1, 5, 7, 4, turn it into 1, 6, 7, 3 with that finger flop right here. Instead of playing the root, I'm just gonna play the notes on the D, G, B string. So that looks like this. So imagine something is playing the root. I'll sing the root. Right, so if something behind you is going boom, 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 something like that, and boom, 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 so you can still get that sound, and you're still kind of practicing the exercise, right? Holding your finger down, flipping the top fingers around. So you're still getting some work done, just might be a little bit more, physically doable than these massive chord shapes, right? I'll just try it with the 2 chord as well. So there's my 2 with that stretch. Instead of doing that, leave out the root, have something else do the root, bass line or whatever. Pretty cool sound. Same thing with this one. This one's actually pretty easy to play the low note. But again, don't even play the low note, just play these. Might be cool for like a little... Sounds really nice, and there's plenty of musical situations where you can use these sounds because everything I'm doing is just normal chords in the key. Now, the note structure that I'm getting is not that normal, but all these sounds exist in a key. You just have to find the right place to use them all. You're practicing your technique, getting some super cool sounds, also backing up with the knowledge of what you're doing. You know, like every time I do these moves, I'm thinking about the numbers as I'm calling them off. I'm thinking about the intervals that I'm playing over each respective chord. You're learning the fretboard, getting cool sounds, practicing your technique, a success all around. One last way that you can repurpose this exercise that we've been talking about into some musical material is simply practicing your chord inversions. They are extremely useful, something that you should probably already be practicing. And the nice thing about them, in regards to using them like an exercise, the chord shapes will often feel radically different from one to the other. So just simply switching back and forth between them is an exercise in of itself, which is pretty nice. Now, of course, the original exercise, one of the main hallmarks of this exercise is we are holding some fingers, 2 fingers or something, while we move others. Now, when we just switch between chord inversions, not necessarily holding fingers down, but we will be radically changing the shape of our hand, which is a fantastic exercise in of itself. So we're going to go over one particular inversion that is a great way to practice this because it's very different from the original normal chord shape, and that will be major 7. This is also going to be sort of a side lesson on finding inversions or creating them yourself, because it's not that bad once you think logically about it. It might take a second to figure out the shape, but once you have them, they'll always be there. So let's start with basic C major 7. Now, first of all, I'm only going to be playing the middle 4 strings to keep it simple. Not playing the high E string, not playing the low E string, right? What are the notes inside of this chord? We've already gone over it. It's a root, 5th, 7th, and then 3rd. But those letters would be C, G, B, and then E. If we reorganize that into a simple 1, 3, 5, 7 order, that would be C, E, G, and B. You can play that like a simple major 7 arpeggio or something. That's the sound of a C major 7 chord. What we're going to do is play the exact same chord, but have the 3rd in the bass. The 3rd is E in the situation. How do we play that in the bass? Just simply find an E on the A string, because we're sticking to the middle 4 strings, or you can just look at C and walk up to its 3rd, which is just a major scale on 1 string. 1, 2, 3. Oh, look at that. That's an E. This is where we're going to play our chord shape, our inversion, the shape with the 3rd in the bass, not the root, the 3rd in the bass. So we already have an E, we just need to find the other 3 notes. We need a C, the root, we need a G, the 5th, and we need a B, the 7. So all you do is just look in the area and go string by string and see what makes sense. So if I see this as an E right here, on the next string I see a C, so that's an option. I see a B, the 7, that's an option. And I see a G right here, the 5th, that's an option. So maybe I can start the chord with like EG or EC or EB. Let's just try one, see what happens. How about E and C? Okay, so I see E, then C. Now what is available on the next string, the G string? Do I have a G or a B that I can play? One of the other 2 notes that we need. Well, I see a B, it's way back here. That's not really that feasible. I mean, I guess it sort of is. It's kind of difficult, but it's there if I want to think about it. What I actually do see, however, is a G right here. Still a bit of a stretch, as I'd have to go pointer, ring, pinky, but that's kind of possible, right? That's E, C, and then G, 3, 1, and 5. Nice, so that's so far the full chord. Now, the only note I need after this is a B, and I've got 1 more string left to find that B, and it will be here on the 12th fret, right? It's either there or there. It's the only place you can find a B on the B string. That happens to be right underneath my pinky, so I can kind of bar that. So that's a feasible shape. If I want to jump back and forth between 1 in the bass C, 3 in the bass C, right? Now, this shape isn't wildly different from what I'm already playing, but it's good to know that it's available. The shape is still a little bit tough to play, especially if I'm trying to play it in lower registers. Even though it's very cool sounding, there's definitely probably a better fingering for this chord, but I'm going to keep it in mind. I'm not a huge fan of the pointer ring stretch. It's just a little bit uncomfortable. Is there some other options? So that was the inversion we found when we started with E and C. Is there an inversion that we can play if we start with E? That note always has to be in the bass because we are playing an inversion with 3 in the bass. What happens if I start with E, G, 3, 5? There's a G right there. So now I just need to find a C and a B on the next set of strings. Well, I see a C right here, so maybe I can play E, G, C, and then a B on the B string. Well, here I can do that. That's the open B string. Very colorful, but if I wanted to do this as a movable chord, maybe here it would be very difficult to play, so that's not really an option. Or I could do this, play the B up top. That's also possible. Of course, if I was allowing myself to play the high E string, this would be a very simple chord. Just play the B up top. But again, trying to stick to this criteria of middle 4 strings only. So playing E, G, C, not really feasible. How about E, G, B, and then play the C somewhere else? Where would that C be? It would have to be on the B string, and there's a C back here. Could I play that? Yes. Sort of. Pretty difficult to play, and it would probably be maybe feasible if I did it way up here. Good to know, not an impossible chord shape to play, but for the most part, a little bit not that feasible. So the only other option we have, we started with E and then C, E and then G. What about if we start with E and B? Here's E and B. Now we just need to find a C and a G. So if I play E, then B, I have a G right here. Maybe I can play that. And then C would be right here. So maybe that's possible? Not really. Nope. 3 fret stretch between the middle finger and ring finger. Not a fan of that. So maybe E, B, and then C on the next string. Well, there's C right here. That's a little bit of a stretch, but not too difficult. And then on the next string, the B string, the only string we have left, we actually have a G right there. I can easily see that G because it's simply up an octave from this G, which is up an octave from this G, right? This shape is very feasible, and it's really nice because we get this half step between B and C, the 7 and the 1. Very colorful sound. A lot of people like this chord. If I just move it around. Very nice, right? This is probably the most common way to play a major 7 with 3 in the bass, although there are a variety of ways. We're going to talk about this one. Why? Because it's wildly different feeling than this. Again, thinking about the exercise that we're coming from, all of our fingers, if we look at how they move, they're all drastically changing where their orientation is. Notice my pointer finger is on the A string. It's now dropping down to the G string, right? My ring finger, what's it doing? Dropping down to the B string. So my ring finger goes from being kind of one of the upper fingers in my hand shape to the bottom finger in my hand shape, right? It's completely changing orientation. What about the pinky? Goes from being the bottom note, the lowest finger, I should say, of my hand, to now in the middle of the shape, and it shoves up a couple frets, or it feels like it shoves up a couple frets, right? So it's a wildly different shape, just general configuration. That's such a great exercise, literally just to run back and forth. Right? Just doing something simple like this. When I was younger and I was practicing these, I would literally just turn on a metronome and go bum, 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 just like this. Run all the other chords that I wanted to play just like that. Such a great exercise, especially with the major 7s. I always started with these because they're so different feeling, and you go from a chord that's kind of clustered up in your hand to a chord that's this massive stretch, or maybe not massive stretch, but enough of a stretch where you get a really great workout. And again, you're getting that chord formed in the air. Your fingers have to move at the same time before you get down to the chord. It's such a great practice. And not to mention, these are sounds that you will use in your playing, or at least you can use them in your playing. And they're just, such a great way to navigate the fretboard. You're getting all these different sounds and you're practicing your technique at the same time. I really, really love these shapes. So this particular thing, if you want to practice this, I actually have a exercise, part of my Power Up series that basically goes through these exact sounds inversions. So if you want to check that out, it's done very slowly, very much like an exercise. You can check out the link in the description, and I go over a bunch of different chord types. Major 7, I think I go over suspended, minor 7, maybe one more. A lot of great stuff in there, and it's definitely something I practiced quite a bit growing up, and it really helped my hand, and it, again, does a similar thing that this exercise does. You're completely changing the orientation of your hand. Before I demonstrate all of these ideas on top of the same track we did in the previous video, just a reminder to always look for any creative opportunities when practicing these shapes. I'm just going to give you a real quick one right here just so you can see how I would do this. So those inversions that we just talked about, what's the hallmark of that idea? For me, it's playing a chord shape and then playing another chord shape that is wildly different in its orientation. And this one in particular goes from a shape that's kind of clustered up to a shape that's very wide, like this. So I want to hone in on that. Maybe there's some other opportunities, other chords that I know that help me practice that same thing. So I like this chord shape a lot. This is a major 7 chord with 5 in the bass. 5, 1, 3, 7. Use it constantly. And this chord shape is a very clustered, kind of closed chord shape like that. So I was thinking, can I move from this to a more open, like wide shape? This is another shape that I personally like. It's basically a chord with 1, 5, 2, kind of like a double power chord, super power chord sort of thing. And then I have sharp 4 of this chord on top. So I'm just going back and forth between these two. And as I started doing it, I'm thinking, oh, this is actually kind of tricky. Like my pinky wants to do something that it shouldn't do. So I would just practice this back and forth. But then as I started using this or messing around, I just started moving the chords around and looking for melodic opportunities, and I started to play a progression that kind of features these moves in some ways that I personally like. So I came up with this just basic progression movement, thinking about this G string as my melody, right? Kind of this climbing melody. Backwards. I'm a huge fan of that type of movement, and what I just played right there is absolutely something I could use for sure in the future. Maybe I can play it instead of kind of hitting the chords like that. I can do a little finger picking pattern. Maybe open B string sounds kind of nice. Get that chord, tough. Love kind of the droning B string in these. Right? Such a cool sound, and that literally manifested by me making this video showing you how I would practice these chord shapes. I thought, let me get some ideas where I'm basically switching between a chord that's clustered and a chord that's big, and just by virtue of doing that, I came up with something that I really like and something that I could definitely use. So always keep your eyes open for creative opportunities. That's why we're doing this series. Take the general ideas that you're working on, the technical ideas from this exercise, repurpose it so that you can turn it into creative things, musical things that you can use, and you can get some really great stuff out of this. All right, so let's demonstrate some of these ideas that we just came up with over a musical context, and we're going to use the same track as we did in part 1. That was Mr. Magic by Grover Washington. So main thing we have to know, of course, is the chord progression, which was C minor, F7, but super important for this video is the key that we are in. Now, we talked about the key we are in for this track in the previous video, but it's really important for this one because basically all of the ideas that we just came up with using this kind of the tenets of this exercise were all chord based. So if we're playing ideas that are chord based, we really need to know what key we are in so that we can easily grab chords that we know are going to work within this context. So what key were we in? C minor, F7, that would be 2 and 5 in the key of B flat. Right, so that means all of our chords are going to be in B flat. So let's just run the chords first so we can get our footing in this sound, and then we'll experiment. So B flat would be the 1 chord, right? Major 7, standard 1 chord stuff. C minor, the actual chord of the progression, the 2 chord, right? It's also minor 7. We can throw in the natural 6 as well, which we will do with our little finger flop move. Definitely going to do that here in a second. D minor is the 3 chord, right? E flat major is the 4 chord, major 7. F, the other chord of the progression, is the 5 chord, dominant, right? G minor is the 6 chord, standard minor stuff. A minor 7 flat 5, or A diminished triad, or A half diminished, whatever you want to call it, is the 7 chord. Going to be an important sound for this track, and I'll talk about why in a second, and then we're back to 1. So the 2 chords that are happening are obviously C minor and F7, so there's a lot of different C minor, F7 stuff that we will do. But what we also want to do is get some other sounds that we can play on top of these 2 chords. Now, one thing I'm going to do is basically just run ideas on every chord in the key, kind of disregarding the track just to see what things sound like. But there are some strategies we can use to get some other chords to play. And I personally call these pretend chords. There's a chord happening, you pretend it's something else to achieve an effect. You can call this a substitution, whatever you want, doesn't matter. Now there's one kind of tactic to find these chords, and it's extremely easy. It looks like this. You're playing a chord. Let's say it's a 2 chord, which is happening in the track, C minor. What you do, think about what this chord is. It's 2 in this key. Think about the number 2 and add 2 to that. So what would that be? 2 plus 2 is 4. So that means if you're playing over a 2 chord, you can at any moment pretend it's a 4 chord. So that would be E flat major, major 7 on top of C minor, the 4 chord on top of the 2 chord. Right? Kind of did this in the previous video, but that tactic will always work. This one is especially obvious because these 2 chords are relative major and minor. E flat is the major, C is the minor, right? In every key, 4 and 2 are relative major and minor in every standard key like we're talking about right now. So that one definitely makes sense. So you'll see me during a C minor chord start playing E flat major stuff. You'll see that happen. What's the other chord? F7, same tactic. What chord is this in the key? The 5 chord. If we want to get another chord to play on top of that, what do? 5 plus 2, which is what? 7, right? Using our elementary math skills to find these cool sounds. So what would that be? F7 is the chord. I'm going to play the 7 chord of the key on top of this, which would be what? 5, 6, 7, A minor 7, flat 5. Very common tactic to use on top of a standard dominant 7th chord. This is the chord. You play minor 7, flat 5. Extremely common. You are probably already doing this if you've ever played this chord. Kind of that classic dominant 9 chord. What are the notes inside of this? F, A, E flat, G, C. Or F's 1, 3, flat 7, 2, and 5. That's why it's called a 9 chord. It's a dominant chord with 2, also known as 9. 2 and 9 are the same notes, right? If you play this chord, though, and don't play the root, get rid of F, this is literally the 7 chord of the key, A minor 7, flat 5. This is, if you look at this as 1, A, this is 1, flat 5, flat 7, flat 3, all underneath that ring finger, right? So within an F9 chord is a literal minor 7 flat 5 chord, the 7 chord of the key, right? So they overlap in a lot of ways. And again, what's that tactic? You're playing over this chord, whatever it is in the key, 5 in this case, plus 2, that's always a sound you can play on top of it. And we're going to want these tactics because we want as many different ways to use these chord sounds that we just came up with. So with that in mind, let's get onto the track and see what it sounds like. I'll start it from the beginning. And let's start with the simple little triad moves that we were doing where we were playing 1, 5, 3, and then adding in that 4 with the pinky doing a little finger flop. Let's try that. There's our C minor, F. I'm going to play C minor right here, F right there. So C minor. Actually, I'm just going to stay right here for a second. Doing some vibrato. Kind of fun. F. F. Just messing around with whatever melody I'm hearing. Now, what I'm also going to do is find other places to play the same chords. So instead of going C, F all the time, I'm going to go C, F. This is going to train me to memorize, oh, this distance from this chord to that chord is the same as this distance, that chord to that chord. C, F, C, F, right? So I'll do the normal F, C minor, drop down to the D string, same chord. It's kind of watch this. What was that? This is C minor, just like this one, but up an octave. See what I'm practicing? The technical stuff, staying in time with the track, knowing the chords, but I'm also practicing a bunch of different locations for the same chords so I can memorize these moves. And because I know this progression is 2 to 5 over and over again, I'm also learning, oh, if this is 2, which it is, this is always 5, drop down a string. If this is 2, which it is, go down a power chord. Oh, look at that, 5 chord. I can go right here on the E string, right? 2, 5. Or I can go 2 to 5. Right? I'm practicing all this stuff at the same time. That's called being efficient with your practice. So again, using this little finger flop thing. Now there's one kind of interesting thing that I noticed when I was practicing this, and that's this specific move. So here's my normal F major 1-5-3 on the D string. And I was playing the suspended version 1-5-4 like this, pointer, ring, pinky. And then when I was going back to the plain triad 1-5-3, I was flipping like this. So it goes from these 2 fingers, holding my pointer finger down, to these 2. When I was practicing this is difficult for whatever reason. I can tell, you can probably even see that my pinky is not going down, or my ring finger is lagging behind my pinky when I go to place them both down. If I just do this over, I can feel it. And as I was practicing this, I noticed that. So that's kind of what I talked about. When you're practicing, be very aware of things that are more difficult than they should be, because maybe that's just like a little wrinkle in your technique that you need to iron out. So I just noticed this and I thought, man, I need to work on this. So I'm not even playing anything, just kind of flipping them back and forth in time with the track, right? And I could definitely feel my ring finger not going down at the same time as my pinky. So that's something I'm really focusing on. Again, just keep your eyes open for things like that. So you'll never know what you come across. You might think there's a move that's really comfortable, and then all of a sudden you're like, ugh, it's kind of odd. Just take some time to work it out. So the other thing we can do was that silly fingering as we were jumping back and forth from the major triad 1-5-3 to the minor triad 1-5-flat 3. We were doing like this kind of silly fingering. Works perfectly over this track because of the 2 chords we are playing, a 2 chord and a 5 chord, C minor, F7. And the reason why it works well is both of those chords have a major and minor pair kind of built in. So when I play C minor, I can lead into it with this little B flat major. So I can go B flat C with my silly fingering to practice this chord move. Let's try that. So, right? I can even grab in my little top note, the F right there. That's the 4 of this chord, right? It almost kind of turns it into an F chord, to be honest, but getting a little workout from there. I can feel like my ring finger is the problem with this move, so honing in on that. What can I do for the F chord? It'll kind of be the opposite, right? Because F is the chord I want to land on. So I'm going to play the minor chord getting into this. And what is this little minor pairing? G minor right there. So 6, 5, like that, the opposite. Into C minor, into F. Pretty cool. Sounds good too. I can also play B flat C instead of doing it down here, which is difficult. I can do it up here, same chords, right? Same exact thing, G minor to F. One more time. This one I can really feel my ring finger wanting to yank that string off the neck right there. So that's something I'm thinking about. Just the natural angle of the ring finger is so, curled like that, it can easily just yank the string off. So that's something I'm thinking about. Obviously, you can also just play the chord like that and not like an idiot, but we're doing this on purpose so we can practice this technique. So that's pretty cool. Lots of interesting opportunities with that one. Now the next one, it's going to give us probably the thickest and most colorful sounds over this track, is going to be playing the 7th chord versions of every chord in the key, but throwing in that chord's respective 6th, like we were doing before. And that gives us this finger flop motion where we hold these 2 fingers down, flip flop these 2 fingers. So just over the 2 chord, for example, right? So So I'm going to do this move and hit every chord in the key. And I'm, again, want to memorize what the chord is, make sure I'm playing the right location, make sure I'm playing the right 6 of each chord, and just keeping my ears open to see what kind of interesting sounds will happen, because some of them might be pretty cool. So I'm going to run everything starting on 2 right here. Here we go. So. Definitely tricky. Some of those chords, just going back and forth between them, I can definitely feel my fingers not wanting to do what they should be doing. And I'm also doing a particular rhythm. You don't have to do that. You can do a simpler one, a more complex one, kind of up to you. Maybe I'll just jump back and forth between the actual chords, the 2 chord and the 5 chord. So C minor right here, F. Interesting. I can feel my fingers wanting to do things that they shouldn't be doing. Like my finger keeps wanting to bar right here, which makes sense because that's often how you would do this, even though I'm telling it to go like that. You know, my fingers definitely want to bar, especially with the F7. I should be doing this because that's what the exercise was, right? But my hand keeps wanting to bar. Not the end of the world, but for the exercise's sake, I kind of do want to do it like that. So that might be something to think about as I'm practicing this. Another thing I can do is play each of those 2 chords, their respective pretend chords. Remember what we did? Instead of playing C minor, we play E flat major. Instead of playing F7, we play A minor 7 flat 5. Another way you can look at that, instead of playing the 2 chord, you play the 4 chord. Instead of playing the 5 chord, you play the 7 chord, right? So here's E flat right here. Sounds cool. I'll just hold this for a second. Sounds nice, right? And then the A right here, so there's the C minor, A minor 7 flat 5, over the F, sounds good. Let's try this. Also, I've been doing a lot of like picking fingers. You definitely don't have to do that. You can strum this stuff if you want. Like if that's, sounds better or works for your technique, absolutely do that for sure. One thing that's kind of important to notice, when I play that E flat, right, and I do my finger flop, playing its 6, let me play that cleaner. When I do that, notice what happens. This is E flat major 7, 1, 5, 7, 3. Finger flop, 1, 5, 6, 3. But what are these notes? E flat, B flat, C, G. You know what this chord also is? Literally C minor 7. So when you do that finger flop, you're actually turning the E flat chord into C minor 7. E flat 6 is the same chord as C minor 7, right? So think about that. The 6th chord version of the relative major is identical note-wise to the standard minor 7 version of its relative minor. That will always be the same for every single relative major and minor, right? It's a nice little trick to keep in mind. So that's the inversion. So in reality, I could just run C minor, E flat 6, also known as C minor to C minor, C minor 7 to C minor 7, right? 1 in the bass, 3 in the bass, 1 in the bass, 3 in the bass. Right? Do that like an exercise. And guess what? It's the same exact thing with this A minor 7 flat 5 up top. The actual chord is F7. When we go to its +2 pretend chord, whatever you want to call it, A minor 7 flat 5, and we do our finger flop right here. When we do this finger flop, what are my notes? A, E flat, F, C, also known as F dominant 7 with 3 in the bass. Right? That's why these chords overlap so easily, because most of the notes are exactly the same. And when you add in this note, they are the same. This is F7, so is this. I can jump back and forth between those 2 inversions. So I'll just hold it on F this whole time. Right? C minor. F. Right? A lot of stuff. Notice what I did right there. That might be something else we can experiment with in a second. I played this chord. What was this? Remember, this was the major 7 with 3 in the bass. I'm playing E flat major 7 with its 3 in the bass, which still functions over C minor. So I look at this chord, even though I know it's E flat major 7 with its 3rd in the bass, I'm actually looking at this as C minor, right? 5, 2, flat 3, flat 7 of that C right there, if you can see it. So that's another way you can think about it. Getting into a little bit into the weeds with this stuff, but you understand what I'm saying. So there was the finger flop with the left side of the hand, right? Holding these two, finger flopping these two. Now let's experiment with some of the other ones we were doing. Holding these two, finger flopping these two. These are going to be way more difficult and way more intense sounding, but let's just experiment. So how about I do like a simpler one? So here's C minor. I'll just do this. Right, in this situation, I'm not really moving my fingers. I'm just kind of sliding them around. Still some value though. Great to practice if you want to like practice kind of opening up your hand like this. So cool sounding chord as well. Really nice. Now the other one we were doing is going to be even harder. That's this. Right. So definitely difficult. Right. And just to recap, this is C minor 1 5 flat 7 4 like this, and then I'm reaching for the 6 on the D string, and then middle finger on flat 3. Ring finger's not doing anything. Super cool chord though. It's worth it. Very nice. F chord, same idea. So here's the F7 standard, right? There's our F7. Let's do this move. F suspended, 1 5 flat 7 4. Moves to, pinky moves to 6. My ring finger moves to the 3. Maybe I'll do middle finger right there. Yeah, that's the finger flop. There we go. Right? This move. Let's just try it. Much easier to play. Sounds cool as well. Wild sound. And I can just mess around with these. Now at this point, I'm just looking for like musical opportunities. I didn't talk about is hammer-ons. Right, kind of doing this, that kind of stuff. Also something definitely important to practice. You can even just hold the chord and just go. Cool sound and get some interesting moves out of that. Again, trying to use some of these stretchier maneuvers. All that stuff we've talked about, you can experiment with this stuff however you want. Run through all the chords in the key. That would be nice. Let's just try it on the 4 chord. That would be this. Very clear finger flop. So difficult. This is really hard. So one is really difficult, but sounds pretty cool. And then you could do the small versions as well, like you don't have to hold the root. Pretty cool, some opportunities there. Some other ones we were doing, I personally like this one right here, kind of this, doing it on the 6th chord basically, because it turns it into an E flat major with 2, starting on the 3. Starting on its 3rd, I should say. How about this one? That one's nice because it's not terribly difficult and it sounds cool. And it's based off of this chord right here, the 6th chord. Essentially, it's really a 4 chord with 3 in the bass, like I mentioned. And then the 7 chord, right here. Again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds behind the theory for everything. The main thing is really just experiment, look for sounds that are cool to you, that target this, particular technical maneuver that you're trying to use. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you just kind of look for other sounds, experiment with chords that you want to play, see what happens. So... That's me doing some inversions, right? Just running E flat, E flat, E flat, E flat, F, F, that sort of stuff that we talked about. Throwing in a little out of key chord right here. That's just the 5 of C minor, so F7 traveling back to C, pretty common sound. And then the last thing I was kind of experimenting with, some of those chords I kind of made up or came up with when I was kind of writing something using this concept. I was playing this chord right here, this like big 1-5-2 sharp 4 sort of sound like this. And I thought, can I use this over this track? Well, of course I can, because I know this voicing is 1-5-2 sharp 4. What chord in the key has a sharp 4 in it, major with sharp 4? It's E flat. So I can just move this chord to E flat and play it over the track, see what it sounds like. So already sounds really cool. And I can bar and get some other notes. I don't know if it works perfectly over the particular vibe of the song, but if I want like a big flourish, it sounds awesome. Maybe move it around to, right? So at this point now I'm just using the shape that's got this big stretchy feel that came from me practicing the exercise, and I'm just modifying it around the fretboard. When I play right here on C, C does not have a sharp 4, so I'm moving it to a normal 4. So this is C's 1-5-2-4-5-1. And I'm just going to play it, see what happens. E flat. Right, C. Maybe I'll go to F. Right here. Pretty. Here. Tough. So... pretty cool, and this is me doing this on top of C minor to F, and notice how I'm doing it. For the C minor, I'm not playing C minor, I'm playing its pretend chord, E flat, with this fun voicing. And then for the F, I'm just playing literally F, 1-5-2-4-5-1 of F. Difficult, I can feel this horn like hitting my wrist right there when I play this one. But still pretty cool. Yeah, really, really great sound. So you see the process. Tons of ideas, creative ideas, cool chord shapes, cool melodies, cool movements, all came from me repurposing this exercise, right? The exercise is great, but turning it into musical tools that you can use is even better. I'll end on this baby right here. That does it for part 2. A lot of these sounds are some of my favorite things to play on a regular basis, and they are very good for finger independence and just building general finger strength when it comes to playing chord shapes. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out the Patreon at the link in the description, and I'll see you in part 3.